I thought I'd share a little side project I got going on with everybody. This doesn't belong to me. It's a buddy of mine I grew up with. It belongs to his kids. He asked me to see if I can fix it for him. What's happening apparently is the chain keeps breaking. And his theory is, so you have these tabs. There's a pivot the engine mounts on that mounts in these two holes, and right here you have an adjustment hole, so you can adjust the engine up and down, which adjust the chain, the slack in the chain. So what his theory is the holes in these tabs, they are opened up a little bit. They're not exactly, I'm not sure what size they were. Looked to be almost ½ inch now. They were probably some metric size, but we'll say 3/8 or 7/16. So he's thinking because they've opened up, the engine moved around and it allowed the engine to torque and move around and keeps breaking the chain. I'm not sure if that's what it is, but I do agree these need to be repaired. And the good thing about metal is you can take some away, you can add some back. But the best way to fix this is I'm just going to cut these off and make new ones out of, say, 2x4 flat bar. It's a good thick material. I think it's a little stronger than what he's got. And make new holes, just drill new holes in it. The problem with that is I don't want to just go cutting these off and welding on flat bar, because I'm not sure where they're going to land, or distance and all that. So the first thing I got to do is make a jig, and just make a jig so I can mount the jig to the tabs and to the cradle, I guess is what we'll call it, swing arm rather. So I can make the jig attached to the tabs. So I know exactly where the tab should be, where the holes in the tab should be. So that's what I'm going to start with. I've already taken the engine and everything off. So what I've got here is a couple of 1.5 pieces of 1.5 angle. So my plan is to use those as the feet on the jig. So I've got 4 of those, so that'll, when I go back on with the new tabs, that'll place me left to right where I need to be, up and down where I need to be. The bolt holes will already be there. Then I can make tabs, bolt them to the jig, and then weld them to the frame, and they will be exactly where the old ones were, and I should be able to bolt everything up, and everything will be lined up. Good thing about making jigs is it doesn't have to be fancy, and it's not going to be. So you can use anything. It doesn't have to be pretty. So what I'll do, I've got some 1-inch square bar, just some scrap. All this is going to be scrap except for the new tabs. So I'll weld this here, weld it here, and then I'll cut another piece to run down across this foot and down to this foot, and then I'll take some 2x4 flat bar and run from here to each of these tabs, mark them, drill them, bolt them together, and just weld them to the jig. Alright, well there's that much of it. This thing's a little hot, so pretty simple. It's just, welds aren't even pretty. They don't have to be. So those feet will sit right in a particular place on the swing arm. Can't move side to side, can't move up and down. So then I've got to make some flat bar pieces. Alright, day 2. Actually been several days, but it's day 2. I've got most of the jig made. So next thing I need to do is make my ears to go to the old tabs. The first thing I want to do, especially on this one here, where this hole has opened up, it's pushed out some material, so it's not flat. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, camera's not going to focus on it. So what I'm going to do is take a flap disc on the grinder, flatten that out, just so it's, you know, smooth there. And I'll probably run over this one too. The biggest problem I'm going to have, I don't know if you can see this. Let's move that. See, this hole here is kind of oval shaped, so I've got to find the center. So I'm thinking what I'm going to do is clamp my ears. I'm going to clamp them to the tabs, weld them to here, and then once they're welded, I'll go in here by eye, make a mark right in the center of about where the washer was. I kind of see the marks in the paint. It's not focusing for you guys, but I can see it. So it'll be by eye. I'll make a mark, take them off, drill them out, and then figure out what size the original 3-bolt is and drill them to that size. Then I can take the jig off, of course, cut these tabs off, get all the way down to bare metal on the tube, and then start making the new tabs.
Bullshit, Mike. Don't bullshit me now.
Keep that clamp together while it cools off a little bit.
Can I give you a tip? And I was like, you're good. She's like, no, please. And I was like, I'm all right. All right, just be good, be safe. She's like, please. And I was like, all right, sure, you sure? She's like, yeah.
I've learned to just accept tips. I used to feel bad about it, but someone's trying to hand me money these days, I'm like, man, I appreciate it. No shame.
$5 for a plug kit. Normally I have in my truck.
Yeah, I don't keep them because I don't like them. I've always patched them if you can get in there,
Well, yeah,
plugs, I mean, that's fine, but you can't just think it's fixed and keep on driving.
Like, I like patches.
Yeah, I like patches. I mean, patches really are permanent. As long as, it's in the tread area,
Yeah.
you can patch them. And you can patch it oval hole or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if I had the means to.
Yeah. Well, I used to always have access to them. Nowadays, it's like, damn, I have to buy a new tire because I just don't want to plug in my tire man. And I don't really trust them when I patch it sometimes. All right, we got the ears welded on. So then we got to drill them out. So I don't know if I can get this to focus in there. But I've got to mark the centers of those holes that are oval. Day 3. I'm trying to, instead of marking the center of the holes with the on the ears, I just got a small 1/8 drill bit, and I figured it'd be easier to see if I can find the center that way. I tell you, that bit's kind of worn out. I'm going to try to get through this and I'll probably replace the bit. Let me see where I'm at. Looks pretty good. Let's try to get on through there. Alright. Try to do the other side. Yeah, having to reach through things on this swing arm, but we'll make it work. Get those shavings off of there, be a little easier. Pretty good. Yeah, I think we nailed it. This is probably going to be a little hard to see, but let's see if I can zoom in. Alright, you can see where the washer was and where the hole that I just drilled is. That's pretty dang close. I'm going to go with that. That's just a pilot hole. The next thing, I've got to figure out what size the through bolt is. So let's bring the light over here. Figure out what size the through bolt is, and I'm sure it's some crazy metric size. I don't really have metric bits. Some numbers do equate to standard, so hopefully whatever it is, it's close enough to a standard bit that I can use a standard bit. Let's see, that one's it's a little high, I think. It's not too bad. I mean, we're talking about an 1/8 inch hole, so we're a very small fraction off center. So I think we're going to go with that. I may try to compensate with the correct bit, and we'll see what we can do. As it turns out, this bolt is a 10 millimeter, which is only slightly larger than a 3/8. In the fabrication world, believe it or not, We don't use metric. We just don't. This is America. So what I'll do is I'll just drill the holes to 3/8, and I'll probably open them up real slightly with a small burr cutter. And so now what we have, tight fit. We have our jig. So I'll drill these holes out to 3/8, and we'll go from there. There we have it. Got our jig, got our holes. Now it's time to make some tabs. Bye-bye. Alright, I'll hit that with a grinder, knock these down, try to get some bare metal there, and we'll make our new tab. A little tight, but I'm going to do my best to get in there. Alright, technically we are on day 5. Just shut the shop down. Yesterday I had a lot going on. So I worked on it a little bit, but I didn't really film much. So if I can get this thing where I want to put it. So what I did yesterday, I just went ahead and finished grinding down where the tabs were, ground the welds off. So I've gotten down to something I think we can work with. You know, it's pretty clean, bare metal. So now what I've got to do is start working on the tabs. Finally we can work on those. So what I've got to do, there's a formula to this. Let me put the jig back on. So it's not so easy for me to explain this formula, especially with everything going on yesterday. I had to do my math myself anyways. So what I figure I'd do, I go home, relax, and sit at my desk where I can draw it out, do the math there, and I'll show you what we came up with. Alright, I'm going to try to explain this formula. I'm going to draw basically a cross section of our swing arm with our jig, as if you're looking from the side of the swing arm with the jig attached to it. So we have our ear from the jig with our hole, and none of this is going to be exact measurement. So we have our jig. This is the ear on the jig. and somewhere right in here we have our tube. Alright, this is a cross section of the tube. Our tab is going to go, it's going to mount to the tube and bolt to the hole in the ear of the jig. To make the tab, we ultimately need to know the distance from the center of the tube to the center of the hole on the ear. You can't measure into the tube, so this is common sense to a lot of people. The easiest way to do that, so you measure from the center of the hole to the edge of the tube, the closest point. So in our case, what we have is 1 3/8 of an inch. So the distance, we'll just say, to the tube is 1 3/8. Alright, so the next thing I need to know is the diameter of the tube, the width of the tube cross section wise. So this one is that tube is right at 1 1/8. So 1/8. Alright. So to figure out the distance between the hole in the jig into the center of the tube, we divide this number by 2, 1 1/8, which is about, I think it's 9/16. So that is half of the diameter, okay? So we've divided the diameter by 2 to come up with half of the diameter. And notice that runs right across the center of the tube. So then, I write this down. So basically, 9/16. Alright, so basically what you do is you add this number to this number, and we get a total distance from the center of our hole to the center of our tube is 1 15/16. So basically, I'm going to use 2x4 flat bar. So what I need to know that for is basically my pilot holes. So the hole that's going to go to the ear is going to be 3/8, and of course I do have to ream it out with a burr cutter to make it 10 millimeter. This hole here, I need a pilot hole because I've got to use a hole saw to get the radius to fit on the tube. So what I like to do, I like to go slightly larger than the tube, so when I put the tab on, I have an air gap there. It helps you when you weld it. You get better penetration there. So what I'm going to do is use an 1 1/4 hole saw. So I need to know the center because the hole saw has a pilot bit. It's 1/4 inch. Doesn't matter. But basically I've got to make my pilot holes (1 15/16) apart from each other. Once I do that, then I can drill this larger hole for the tube with an 1 1/4 hole saw. So then my flat bar will look something like this. We'll have a large hole and a small hole. So then what I'll do is we'll cut the flat bar out kind of fancy, I guess. you know, it'll look a whole lot better than this. I'm not real good at drawing freehand. So basically we'll have this tab. This is a tab right here. So imagine the tube, the ear, hole in the ear. So then what we'll have is this tab will come down, and it's not really going to be rounded like that. And we'll have a slight air gap where I can weld it to the tube. That's the whole formula. It's really simple. I probably made it sound a whole lot more difficult than it is. This is it. That's basically what I'm trying to do here. So tomorrow I will go ahead and measure all this stuff out, mark it out, cut it out, and weld the tabs to the tubes. Fabrication will be done. Then we'll paint. We'll put some kind of paint on. I don't know that I have that same red. We'll put some kind of paint on there and put the engine back in, put it all back together. Just like that, we got some tabs. So went ahead and drilled all my holes. If I were smart, I would have cut one hole with a hole saw and made my ear holes on opposite ends of it, so I could basically cut tab in half. So this would have been one tab, this would have been another. We'll call it a brain fart. I didn't do that for some reason. So I cut two sets, or one set, I'll say. So now what I want to do is we'll cut this out. We're going to cut them out. We'll do something kind of like, this is a rough drawing. We'll taper them, kind of like that. So there'll be something like this. This will be the tab. You know, it's going to be cleaner than that. I can cut things out a lot better than I can draw them. Just a tapered tab. I do want to leave some of this material just so I have room to run a bead down. I'll have something there. So I'll cut it wide at the base and taper it around the top hole. Something like that. Well, let's go ahead and cut them out. Alright, we got the tabs made and bolted to the jig. I know they're not that pretty, so all we got to do now is weld them to the tube. it's kind of boogered up in some places, but it would have been a lot easier to take this off, I guess, take the whole swing arm off. But it's gonna work. It's gonna be real strong, a lot stronger than what he had. I've got the other side of these tapped, the inside, so I'm gonna take the jig off and weld the inside. Really, bye-bye bolts. The jig is kind of in the way. I'll tell you what. There we go. That's perfect. Alright. Got the tabs welded on. Certainly not my best welds at all. But it's it's really hard to get up in there. It would have been easier to take the swing arm off. But I didn't, and I wasn't going to. So, alright, we got some paint on it. It doesn't look that great, but I think it'll be fine. We're gonna go with it, and the guy honestly doesn't mind. So, put a couple of coats of primer, a couple of coats of paint, and I'm surprised. Just plain Jane red enamel matched up pretty well. I guess I got lucky on that. So let's go ahead and start putting the engine in. Sometimes working by yourself is a lot of fun. Two ways to skin a cat. Going to get lucky on this, because the problem I'm having the problem I'm having, I just realized. So inside that pivot, there's not a sleeve that goes all the way through. There is a bearing at either end. So when I push the bolt through the left tab and through the left bearing, inside that tube on the pivot, it opens up. So the end of the bolt, I've just got to get lucky and try to get it through the bearing. Once I get it through the bearing, I should be able to move the engine around a little bit and get it to slip through the tab. Boom. It's all about holding your tongue just right. Or through on that side. So put the nut over here. We'll tighten that down and then start working on the adjustment. There's little isolators that go in there, so I'll work on that. Alright, we got our engine mounted on the new tabs. And we have the adjustment bolt set up. I don't have a chain, so I'm just going to leave it where it is. But I think the reason the chain was breaking, you see your sprockets here. This is the top one, which is on the drive pulley for the torque converter clutch, is not quite lined up with the axle sprocket. So anytime that happens, you're putting that chain in a bind. And I can also see on the right side of the top sprocket, you can see how the teeth are worn more than on the left. So all this is a matter of adjustment. I can adjust the rotor and the bottom sprocket, that whole hub. And the reason I feel like that is the problem, and thought at first that was a problem, as you can see the rotor here, let me zoom out, clear it up a little bit. The rotor here, the bolts are rubbing on the caliper bracket, which is right there, the caliper's mounted on. So that tells me that whole hub is too far to the left. There's a set bolt. I've loosened a little bit, so I've just got to try to free everything up and move my bottom hub to the right and see if we can get those lined up better. Now, focus. Now we're getting there. Lined up. That took a lot of work, actually. That sucker hasn't moved in a while. It was kind of seized onto the axle. So let me go ahead and tighten the set bolt for it. A lot of gravity around here. Let's see here. It's probably going to take two hands. As much as I'd like to film tightening a stupid bolt. Alright, we're down there. I'm going to use two hands and go ahead and cinch that down. Nothing like having cranes. We're pretty much done, other than putting the battery in and hooking all the electronics back up. Our new tabs are made. They look pretty good. The engine's back in, sprockets lined up. Not sure if I can get in there now. Yeah, it's lined up. We're back on the suspension. So what I got to do now is just finish up the electronics. I'm not going to bore you guys with all that, and we'll load it back in the truck and deliver it. If you guys want to see more videos like this, let me know in the comments.